Hey there, here's a quick story. So imagine you're in a leadership review, looking at progress on key initiatives, and suddenly you realize the team's been working on something completely different from what you thought the priorities were. And it's not because they're off track, it's because somewhere between strategy and sprint planning, the message got lost. Now this kind of misalignment happens more often than we'd like to admit. So I'm going to dig into this a little bit here and we'll talk about what to do about it. So let me just pull this up, drive this over a little bit. And let's look at this. So the problem is that leaders think one set of priorities is driving execution, but the teams are executing on something else entirely. And the result of that is that strategic goals get missed, the team feels like they're spinning their wheels, credibility takes a hit, and then execution just generally turns into a bit of a mess. Well, how do you know that this is happening in your organization? Well, here are some clues. For one thing, your teams might not be able to clearly explain how their work maps back to company priorities. And for another point, your leadership reviews include surprises. They shouldn't. Nothing should be there that's surprising. And then thirdly, departments may be off doing things that feel disconnected from the org-wide direction. These are symptoms of this problem happening. If that sounds familiar at all, here's a simple fix that you can run right away. Step one. Let me move this over a little bit. Build an initiative inventory. List every active and upcoming project across departments. And this is not what should be happening, but what actually is happening. And this matters because you can't fix misalignment if you don't know what's in flight. And often leaders are shocked by how many unofficial or legacy projects are still quietly consuming time and resources. So as an example, let's say you lead a game development organization and you think your team is heads down polishing a multiplayer feature for Q3. But in your inventory, you find two art teams that are finishing assets for a shelved campaign, one engineering group that's optimizing a deprecated back-end service, and a tools team that's chasing some UX ideas that were never greenlit. This is not good. And here's a tip. Don't limit this to official roadmap work. Capture the shadow projects, the while we're at it enhancements, and overhang tasks from past initiatives. Now step two, let's open that up here. For each of these items, ask which of our strategic priorities does this support? And this matters because it forces clarity and it reveals where execution is helping or hurting strategic focus. And you'll typically find three patterns. One is orphans. This is work that's not tied to any current priority. An example of this is a team is polishing a level editor feature that was championed by an executive that's left the company, and it no longer aligns with player engagement goals. Another pattern is the gaps. These are priorities with no active initiatives. For example, you set reduced player churn as a strategic goal, but no current initiative addresses onboarding or re-engagement. And then there's overloads. These are too many projects tied to a single priority. For example, 4 separate teams all working on monetization features, and this causes overlap, duplication, and internal competition. So the overall tip here is involve department leads in this mapping session. This is going to help you catch the blind spots and get early buy-in. And that brings us to step 3, which is to adjust. So based on what you find, take some corrective action. First of all, retire projects that are no longer aligned. Reassign effort to backfill under-supported priorities, and then rescope and resequence the overloaded areas. An example of this is, for example, pausing 2 art-heavy features that aren't tied to Q3 goals. So you redirect those teams to support a live ops event, perhaps, something aimed at player retention, because that's a clear match to a top priority. And then you break a bloated monetization push, let's say, into 2 sequential shippable phases. You don't have to make all of the changes at one time. Just prioritize the biggest misalignments and adjust them in sprints. And when you do this right, you draw a straight line between what leadership says matters and what the teams are actually working on. Now, it's not necessarily flashy, but this is how strategy becomes execution. Now, if this resonated with you, I've got more that you might like. I put together a free guide called Survive and Thrive. You'll find the link in the video description. This goes into the topic in more detail. It walks you through 6 more moves that you can make right now to keep delivery on track without burning your team out. So take a look when you get a minute. It's free. I think it'll help.